welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today's video is actually a painting that was inspired by a book that I read recently. It's called The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab, and it was a really good book. So for those of you that don't know, I am a massive bookworm. I love to read in my spare time, and I'm a massive fan of V.E. Schwab. She's done loads of different adult fantasy novels, and you've got things like A Darker Shade of Magic, This Savage Song, and a couple of others that are just, they're really good series. She's done a few duologies, and yeah, really good world building in all of her books. I really like them. And this book, The Near Witch, is her debut novel, and they had reprinted it with a brand new cover and also a shorter story alongside it, and I decided to pick it up. The cover, gorgeous. I'm going to have a picture up, but the cover is just gorgeous, and then the pages themselves, I forgot, it's a beautiful book. And it was in the adult fantasy section, although to be fair, upon reading it I would put it more as young adult than adult fantasy, simply because the way it reads, it is from a younger person's perspective, but the way it reads, it does come across a bit more childish than I would have the usual adult fantasy be. But it was a really good story. I'm not going to go into too much detail in case anybody has been wanting to read it or something, but basically it's about this place called Near, and there are like 3 things that are rules in Near, basically. Like, there's never any strangers, you don't go out onto the moors, and the Near Witch is dead. Like, they're like the 3 things that just always happen. They've always been that way, they never change. Except, of course, in this book, it does change. And there's this one scene in the book that's right towards the end, and it's where the main protagonist picks up the skull of the Near Witch, and the skull itself isn't a full skull. The cranium's missing, and instead it's filled with like flowers and moss and soil and things like that. Now that image, it just when I was reading it I was like, I have to draw this. So the same day that I finished the book, I sketched this out, and it was quite late in the evening, but I really wanted to do it. I didn't do the skull with flowers and things like the book, I think mainly because at the time I was a bit too tired. I couldn't really think about how I wanted the flowers and that to be. Thinking about it more, probably should have drawn out the skull separately a few times so that I could actually get an idea of how to do the flowers and things to make it more like the skull from the Near Witch, but I didn't. I just decided to do a normal skull, partly because it was easier for me and it meant less work into practicing the composition, but it also meant that I could do quite a simple piece with very simple tones. Like, there isn't that much colour thrown at this, and I kind of wanted that, something a bit more subtle yet impactful. Like, the image itself was impactful and not so much the colours. So I did it was quite good to try and do that. But upon finishing this sketch, I realised that this, although to me this is a scene out of a book that I read, this is also a scene out of Hamlet. I'm pretty sure most people know what Hamlet is, but it's a play by Shakespeare, and there is a moment in there where the main actor is holding up a skull, and it's really iconic, and I genuinely didn't think about it until after I'd sketched it out, but I was like, oh well, I'm too tired now, then I just went to bed. So I carried on this morning and I decided to add the gouache, and I did think about changing the skull to having it with the flowers and things to make it more like the Near Witch rather than Hamlet, but I don't know, I like Hamlet as well. I like the fact that, to me, this represents both stories now. So yeah, I kind of went with it. And honestly, I think I'm going to have to do this more often in doing a piece based on a book that I've read, because as I said, I'm a massive bookworm. I love reading and I read a variety of different things, and they are, I mean, the tales in them are just so inspiring. And when I read a book, like, I don't see the words on a page. It's like I'm watching a movie, because I can just literally, it's like I see the characters, like they're doing all those things. I'm not just reading words on a page, and that's like, it's great. So I do kind of feel like, especially now with me being a bit more confident in portraits and stuff, that it would be fun to do, maybe each time I finish a book, to do a drawing that's dedicated on something that happened inside that story, something that captured me. And I think it's a great way to kind of do a tribute. So if I've really enjoyed that book, then this would be a really nice way to kind of capture that book. So it's something I haven't done before, but I am definitely going to try it, because I just think it's a good way for me to, one, improve and kind of come up with how I want to do the composition. And I did spend quite a lot of time searching for references to get the right kind of profile, and those hands were quite difficult to do. As usual, we all know my love-hate relationship with hands, but honestly, it was just, I just felt so inspired. And also, I think part of that, because I felt so inspired by something I'd literally just read and I loved it, it was then so much easier to draw. As I said, the hands caused a little bit of hassle, but nowhere near as much as the page before this, which I think is the previous previous video that went up, which was the redraw. And if you can hear the squeaking, I'm really sorry, the dog's playing with his squeaky toy, but yeah. So it was a lot smoother, it was a lot easier, and I think because I was a lot more invested in this, like, I knew exactly how I wanted to look. It wasn't a redraw, I wasn't trying to perfect something, I was literally just trying to get this image from a book that I had just finished out onto a page. So it was just so much easier to draw. And although at first I did the face a bit too squashed together, once it was all sorted, I was really happy with how this side profile came out. And again, if you've been with me for a little while, you know that I used to really struggle with side profiles, and it wasn't even that long ago that I was doing side profiles really poorly. Like in February alone, I did some awful ones, but I've definitely felt a lot happier. Another thing that was great about this is, obviously I'm using my gouache, and it's my Reeves gouache, just because that's what I use in my sketchbook. And I really enjoyed it, like, because I'm using quite a muted colour palette, which is unusual for me. Normally I have some sort of pop of colour, or I'm doing something, but the only real bit of colour is actually her eye. And I kind of did it like this turquoisey colour for her eye, just so that something was like bright and capturing. But the rest of it, it was really interesting, and the main colours I used were my browns, so I have a variety of different browns, yellow, and then different variety of reds, and that was literally all I used, apart from the peach colour, which I topped up because I always use a peach colour mixed with a bit of pink and yellow for the skin tone. But it was really enjoyable to do this quite muted colour palette, and it was nice to actually paint a skull. So for those of you that's been with me from the very beginning, you would know that I used to do a lot of soft pastel skulls, and they'd be like animal skulls, and I'd have them with some sort of foliage or something like that. And I used to really enjoy doing them in soft pastel. It was so easy to do. Like, I loved the fact that I could get that smooth colour, and like, it always worked. And this is the first time that I've actually painted a skull in gouache, and I was really pleasantly surprised at how much fun it was to do. Like, it was more of a challenge than me using the soft pastel, but it was so much fun just to layer up the colours, build up the shading, build up all the shadows, build up the depth, and it was, yeah, a lot more fun than I expected. It's probably something I'm going to do again, because I genuinely did enjoy drawing the skull, and a human skull isn't something I've done before, so it's not like fully correct. So I know, like, looking at this now, there's a few things I should change on that skull, but for me, as something that I haven't really drawn before, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the painting process a lot. And as usual, I go in with my fine black liner and a white jelly roll pen just to finish off all those little details before adding in some final shading to that skull. But this was a really enjoyable thing to do, and it's definitely something I'm going to do again, of finishing a book and making a drawing based on that book, because it was just that, to me, this was just such a really nice thing to do, and at the end result is I'm really pleased with this little one. So I hope you've enjoyed it and you like the image as much as I do. Hi guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This was a lot easier than the last sketchbook session. I don't know what happened that day, but as you probably tell, I ranted quite a bit on that voiceover, and this one was much better, so I'm a lot happier with it. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.